Fun. Normally I'm a mover. I like to run around up there. But because there's folks online, and also there's going to be some times where I want to use the cursor to point something out specific in a photo, I'm going to try to stay back here. Hello? All right, so oh, there I go. I really want to walk over there. It's right here. So this is the neck of the woods we're talking about. And I'll explain why I ended up going here in the first place in just a second. But Tucson, we're down in Southeast Arizona, kind of this little corner created by the interstates. Sierra Vista is a big home base. But what makes this particular region so magnificent for birding, and if you have any kind of opportunity to go there, if you haven't already, I definitely recommend it, is a few different things. By the way, these circles, these were made by me in Microsoft Office. These are not geologically accurate, just for representation, but there's a few different areas that overlap here. So there's the Sonoran Desert and the Chihuahuan Desert that are a little bit different desert types that end up meeting right there in that corner. There's also, when you're there, it's hard to think about this, but kind of the very, very bottom, the tail end of the Rocky Mountains. So it creates these sky islands is what they're called, right here. So here's the Chiricahuas, here's the Gesundheit, Huachukans. But these mountains, all of a sudden, it was just a flat desert, and then it skyrockets up to maybe 8,000 feet. And so you get a lot of diversity in a very tiny amount of space. But there's also just the fact that it's right there next to Mexico. Things fly across the border. I got to see it happen. No one stopped them. And then, of course, in between all of this, there's creeks and streams and rivers and things creating riparian corridors, cottonwoods, willows, sycamores, which are really pretty trees that I don't know if we have them in this area at all. But just all these different biomes and habitats put together, you get a lot of really cool stuff. Yes. We have the technology. So how this started, I actually didn't know I was going to go at all. I had like PTO approved. I was going to leave town September 15th and 19th. I was going to go on a bachelorette trip to Nashville. And then on September 7th, it got canceled. And there's a lot of good drama there that I don't have time to tell you about, but it's a whole thing. So I panicked and I didn't know what to do with this time. I had this time off, and can I make lemonade out of this? I also, here's kind of a silly part. I was out about $400. I couldn't get my deposit back on our VRBO all the girls were sharing. I had to pay the $200 cancellation fee for Frontier. So somehow spending like $1,000 on a trip made that better. That's like girl math, birder math, I think. But basically that day on September 7th, I went home and hyper focused for 6 hours and like did not get up from the kitchen table in my computer until I had figured out a whole game plan. So first I was thinking, all right, I have like $140 left over from Frontier. I have to use it in the next 3 months. It's a ridiculous rule. I was like, where can I fly that's kind of close and I can go there in a week? Like that's mid-September. This is bird migration. I got to go somewhere, but where can I fly for that cheap? And I thought Phoenix is kind of close. I bet I can get a good flight. Southeast Arizona. And it kind of dawned on me. A few Facebook friends, I think Geneva Fox is one, someone I used to bird with in North Carolina. They had posted pictures of their trip to Santa Rita Lodge in the Santa Rita Mountains south of Tucson. And so I knew that there was this birding hotspot destination area. I really did not know much beyond that, except there's this one cool lodge that there's turkeys and hummingbirds. That's really where my knowledge started with that night. But I went home, got on eBird, pulled up just all of the hotspots in that Southeast Arizona area, and anything red I wanted to try to go to. So I would be willing to put money on this red dot down here. That's probably Patagonia Lake State Park. Over here is probably the San Pedro House. Up here in Tucson, that's probably Sweetwater Wetlands. If it was the darker the color and the more it kind of fit together on a map, I was going to try to go there. So in 6 hours, I'm a big Excel spreadsheet fan. I put together this whole itinerary, including drive time and Google Maps and everything. I had the prices all mapped out. I knew when sunrise was going to be every day. I had a couple of notes way off to the side about possible other things. Fast forward to I'm actually feet on the ground doing stuff. There's a few places that just didn't work out. So this first trip, I was not able to go to the solid waste facility in Sierra Vista. I know, not the solid waste facility. As birders, you know that is like possibly a big loss. And then the San Pedro house, I had heard great things about it. I just didn't have the time to go there. I had picked out this place. It looks like an old abandoned golf course. This day ended up taking way longer than I expected, and I just skipped that entirely. Same thing over here on my way out. I did not have time to get out to the Boyce Thompson Arboretum. I would have an opportunity to go again. So I'm going to try to speed through my first trip. One reason I'm able to do that is I didn't know I was going to be here tonight over a year later, so I didn't really take very many photos. But basically what I did was I landed, I picked up my rental car. If you're interested, I use Turo. It usually ends up being, it's like an Airbnb, but for cars. It usually ends up being cheaper than like a Hertz or an Enterprise or something. They can also have it delivered to an airport. So I know on my second trip out there, I timed it. I was at my car in like 15 minutes from getting off the plane. It's pretty efficient. So big fan of that, but I pick up my rental car, I drive out to Riparian Preserve at Gilbert Water Ranch. And then by that time I'm done there, it's time for me to go down to the Airbnb that I had in Sierra Vista, which was about a 3.5 hour or so drive. So that Riparian Preserve at Gilbert Water Ranch, I know it's a good trip or vacation for me when I land somewhere and I'm there for maybe an hour and I'm like, if I had to fly home right now, I would be cool. I would think this was a worthwhile trip. Like I could go home right now and be pretty happy with things. And that's how I felt at this riparian. I didn't include my eBird map with everything. I did here just to kind of show this place is really in the middle of the city. It's in a super urban developed area, but there's all these wetland cells. Maybe it's water treatment area. I did not do research on what this place is. What? Water recharge. What's that mean? But you can just walk around for free through all of them. They are all at different levels of water, so it's good, good for different species of birds. One of them was this particular day, this was mid-September, it was loaded with shorebirds, and on a slightly deeper wetland, there were a ton of ducks. And come August of the following year, ducks were kind of far and few between. So for September, that was a benefit, was I got a lot more ducks. Black-necked stilts. There is a great egret there, obviously, but you see that little football-sized bird back behind it? A little green heron. So tons of shorebirds, water birds, ducks, wading birds. Oh, thank you. I'll be able to drink that at 8:30. Black phoebe, vermilion flycatcher. These are two guests that maybe you have seen in El Paso County before. Vermilion flycatcher, I'm not going to include it and note it on all of my visits to all the different places, but you can just probably assume that I saw one everywhere I went. They're pretty common. Gambel's quail, very common. Rabbits, and sometimes rabbits and quail together. And there was a lot more things here. I remember getting my lifer Gila woodpecker here, and I quickly, that's another bird I'm not going to bring up a lot because it turns out they're around every corner. Sometimes they're in swarms. I might be exaggerating a little bit. Ladderback woodpecker was here that day. Yeah. All right, so the next day I'm done. And a little bit about why I chose this area, Sierra Vista, especially because it's right here at the bottom of that Huachacan mountain range, not really a range, just the Huachaca Mountains. But there are 3 major hummingbird hotspots right here. And there's a lot more hotspots and good birding around it, all up and down this San Pedro River. But I could have, there's a lot of Airbnbs like right in the middle of Sierra Vista and a lot closer. I ended up choosing this thing way out, semi in the middle of nowhere, because I just liked that idea. It was along the river. It was in the middle of nowhere. It was surrounded by desert apart from being near the river. And I mean, this was only a 30-minute drive down here to the hummingbird hotspots. And I knew that wasn't the only place I wanted to go. I knew that I was going to go all the way out to Whitewater Draw on one day. It was also really cheap. I think it was $114 per night after all those taxes and fees that surprise you. And it was just really nice. I would end up liking it so much that I would go there again the following year. I do remember that the night I was hyper-focusing and planning everything, the one thing that really sold me on this particular Airbnb was someone in the comments said, this place has such great bird feeders out front. There were 16 Gila woodpeckers at once. And I was like, well, yeah, take my money. That sounds great. So on this day, switched up the plan a little bit. Initially, I was intending on doing Whitewater Draw first, big wetland pond reservoir type area, but I ended up just deciding to go to these hotspots first and making one big circle around in Cochise County, bam, 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 out to Whitewater Draw, and then back. Ramsey Canyon Preserve. I thought I had done a lot of research, didn't do enough. Turns out that the Ramsey Canyon Preserve, it's a nature conservancy site. You have to pay, I think, $8 to enter the area and walk around, go birding. There's a gate on the parking lot and it doesn't open until 8 a.m. I didn't think that would be a possibility. It's a birding location. Your gates should be open at 5, you know? But I get there too early. I don't know what to do. There's not really a public parking area or anything. So I just back up the street and I'm not sure what this place is. Arizona Folklore Preserve. No one was there. No one was watching. I just kind of parked there for most of the hour waiting on Ramsey Canyon to open. It worked out. I mean, I was in a new place here. So if I just get out of my car, I'm going to be happy with what's going by. Turkeys, like a big flock of them surrounded my car, just kind of slowly moving through the area. And it was very Jurassic Park-esque, where I'm looking out like, all right, just don't move. Acorn woodpeckers. This is another woodpecker species that you just get used to. They feel like they're everywhere as long as you're close to that montane ecosystem, the mountains. I didn't get photos, but this is where I ended up getting my lifer painted redstart. There are photos of those coming, but really cool bird, super common down in this area too. So anyway, I finally actually make it into Ramsey Canyon Preserve. Few highlights here. Yellow-eyed junco, probably looks familiar with what might be coming to your feeders now, just crazy yellow eyes. Arizona woodpecker. I think every photo I got of one is blurry because they hop. If I remember correctly, this is an Arizona sister butterfly. I found that for every 10 birders in Southeast Arizona, there's like one butterfly enthusiast. And they are very happy to tell you about all the butterflies. Black-throated gray warbler, some kind of lizard. These things are, is it a, is that the same? Never mind, we'll see more. There's more pictures of them coming. That's what Bruce said they were. Ramsey Canyon, my biggest draw to this particular location, they do have bird feeders. They have hummingbird feeders. I don't remember seeing any, there were lifer hummingbird species. We'll talk more about them later. But my biggest draw to this location were elegant trogons. This was a hotspot for those. I never saw one. Just didn't see it. So off to the next place. This was in Miller Canyon. So up down the road and in again, down another canyon, Miller Canyon. Yes, Beatty's Guest Ranch. I'll end up revisiting this and talk more about it later, but really interesting hummingbirds. In particular, this one right here, this is the white-eared hummingbird, and Beatty's Guest Ranch is kind of the only place to, like, for sure see it, regularly see it. It's a species that, yeah, it'll pop up in other places, but this is the place that if you want to make sure you see it. We'll talk more about this here. Refresh my memory. Violet capped or violet crowned? Violet eared. Violet crowned hummingbird. Rivolis. And I think this is a young Anna's. Okay, Tyler Stewart gives a thumbs up. This area is just amphitheater style, covered, shaded, and there's maybe 10 or so hummingbird feeders dangling around, and they are swarming all around you. Ash Canyon Bird Sanctuary. So now we've gone south again on that loop. Ash Canyon, this is a really, really cool place. I felt bad because at the beginning, there's this big sign that talks about, here's all the species you can see here. And we request $5 for you to donate. And it's 2022 and I'm a millennial. Like, I don't have cash on me. So like, I just went in and birded and felt bad about it. We'll get back to that later. But you might recognize this sorry, not a hummingbird, woodpecker right here. That's our ladder-backed woodpecker. Luckily, one of the guy who lives there, he came out and was just shooting the breeze with me, really friendly. It was getting to be the afternoon by this point, so I think I was the only one there. And he just came, sat and chatted and would just ID things left and right for me, no binoculars. And this came through and I was like, is that a Woodhouse's scrub jay? There was a lot of things not on my radar for this trip. But he was like, no, it's a Mexican jay. Sweet, lifer. So anything that kind of looks like a Woodhouse's scrub jay down there, a Mexican jay. These two birds right here, these are Lucifer hummingbirds. And they're, once you see them, like they're super distinctive. The male has a purple gorget, and that bill, you see how that's really decurved. He was able to point it out. Feeder number 3, Lucifer male, there it is. Sweet, thank you. And then the female showed up later. Going through my photos, I don't know if I put this on my list, but that's Augusta's hummingbird, right? Look how purple that thing is. You think it's big? What do we think? Oh, okay, it's so purplish. Okay. That is true. Yes, we've got it. Now I don't feel so bad because I don't think I put Augusta's on my list for that day, but going through my photos, I got kind of confused on this one. And just a Buick's wren. They're same thing. I feel like I see a lot of them in that area. Heading way out, maybe an hour's drive out east to Whitewater Draw. Again, I didn't take a picture of the whole view because I didn't know I was going to be here. On the way there, every kingbird that I saw, I probably took a dozen photos of it because I knew there were kingbirds that weren't Western kingbirds and they weren't Cassin's kingbirds, but I didn't know the difference well enough. And I thought, well, I just better take photos of everything and I'll figure it out later. From this trip, I think I only saw Western and Cassin's kingbirds. I didn't see the other ones. But when I did get to Whitewater Draw, probably my highlight of that trip was I saw my first Sora. It's been on my life list. I've heard them certainly, but I just assumed I would never see one. But I got to see one and actually take pictures of it. Loggerhead shrike, northern harrier, all of these are killdeer. There were probably a dozen to 16 killdeer all hanging out, maybe on an early migration. I do remember from this day, there were hundreds of swallows. And then one belted kingfisher, tons of vermilion flycatchers. It was a cool spot. I think, a flock of white-faced ibis flew through. So that was a really nice bird to see down there. On my way out, you can kind of tell in the lighting in this photo that the sun's starting to go down. It's probably 5 o'clock or so. I'm getting ready to do that hour drive back to Sierra Vista. The only reason I'm really including this photo, is that a solitary sandpiper, I think? I took this photo because it's the one photo I have of this moment. The rental car I had was a 2012 Chevy Malibu. Random, I chose it because it was cheap. Well, here we are on this dirt road that has water on it for maybe 50 yards. The dirt is really compact, right? Like we're in a very arid desert-like area. Yeah, there's water on the road. That's fine, right? I get maybe halfway through it and we are stuck in the mud. Like I said, this is a different presentation from last month. This month is all about throwing caution to the wind and just getting lucky and we'll be fine. But anyway, I got stuck. I at one point opened the car door and the water is right to the brim of, and I'm spinning and I'm stuck. I call AAA because I'm like, oh, no problem. We get a tow truck out here. It doesn't go through. We're in a really remote area. I try the online reporting. That's not going through. And I'm just like, well, I'm going to have to get out and walk to somebody's farmhouse and hope there's a nice country boy with a truck and something to pull this out. And we're just going to get home really late and we'll deal with it. And then the last thing before I got out and waded through the water to start walking down this dirt road, so I was like, maybe let me put this in reverse. And that worked. I got out. I don't know if I breathed the whole time I was backing out of it. I just got lucky. But then it turns out that was a great decision. We got lucky. We worked out. I had to go down a different road and I found a tarantula. So we hung out for a while. And then I look up and there's a road runner running down the road. Look at him, he's levitating. So in hindsight, I don't regret going through the water. But I also can't recommend you do the same thing. Yes. Did I say we? Maybe I was talking about me and that bird. He was probably watching the whole thing. For the record, though, I did make it home just in time to catch the last of the sunset. This is another reason I chose that Airbnb way out, kind of in a remote area, is that's a nice view. All right, day 3. We start at the Airbnb. I end up going to this place called the Escapule Wash. It happens to be just maybe a mile down the road from my Airbnb. It was not on my radar until I read the guest book at the Airbnb. Someone wrote in it, try this wash. It's great for birding. So I went there and I ended up spending an hour and a half. The reason why there's such a gap between me actually getting over to the Patton Center for Hummingbirds is I used Merlin's song ID. I think it was running this whole 90 minutes. And so my phone was dead. And so I went back to the Airbnb, charged up my phone, and then actually hit the road. Heading west now and up to Santa Rita Lodge in the Santa Rita Mountains. Patton Center for Hummingbirds, Patagonia State Park. I had one little detour to make. I had a lead on a 5-striped sparrow, and then I was going to head back up to Santa Rita Lodge for the night. I didn't anticipate actually birding at my Airbnb, but it proved to be a spectacular spot. Here's a, what's it called? A black-throated sparrow, a Nashville warbler. I think this is a blue-gray gnatcatcher. At the time, that's what I reported. Also back then, it was not on my radar that there were other kinds of gnatcatchers to pick and choose from. So not totally sure. And then lazuli bunting. There were a lot of things that just really good birds. This right here, this was my lifer, black-throated sparrow. Down to that Escapule Wash, beautiful area. I did not get very far in those 90 minutes I was there. I think I only walked maybe a quarter mile down the wash and then the quarter mile back to my car. I just would take 2 steps and see or hear something new that entranced me. I took a lot of pictures of cardinals, hoping they would be Pyroloxia. Not this trip, oh well. I think that's a Cassin's Vireo. I think. Bullock's Oriole, and then tough to see with the bad lighting, but painted bunting, yeah. By the way, I didn't say this, but this is not the photography presentation. This is the, let me just make sure I have proof, or let me have a photo to reference later on, maybe. But that's how birding goes sometimes, right? Off to the Patton Center for Hummingbirds. There's bird feeders of all types, so you can get a lot of things here. These were Inca doves, really pretty, really scaled. The violet crowned hummingbird. Thank you. That looks like a black-chinned hummingbird. We're familiar with them. And then a broad-billed hummingbird. And then right here, that's my lifer Lucy's warbler. The following year, when I arrived back at the Patton Center for Hummingbird I saw one Lucy's warbler there as well. And I thought that was just really fitting. Oh, and then it's hard to see, I'm sure, on the computer screen, and it kind of blends in with the tree behind it. But as best I can tell, that's maybe a juvenile green-tailed towhee. It's got that olive color all over it, but it is going through one heck of a molt. Between Patton Center for Hummingbirds and Patagonia Lake State Park, I inserted stopping at this rest stop because there had been a lot of reports of rose-throated Bacard. Pretty reliable. People said they had been hanging out. I'll show you a picture later on of what it's supposed to look like. Really pretty bird from Mexico. I hung out for 10 minutes. I didn't see anything. I didn't hear anything. I got lucky and I looked up and there was a black vulture. So there's my one black vulture of this Arizona trip. So every time I think it's a bust or something, there's always that one thing that makes it worthwhile. Patagonia Lake State Park. I was really hyped for this location. If you've seen that movie, The Big Year, there's a whole scene where they go there, and in the movie, it makes it look like you're in an aviary or something. And it was this big birding hotspot. But here's where I think I messed up. By the time I got here, it was the early afternoon on a Saturday. So there were tons of people out on boats on the lake. It was really noisy. No matter where I was walking and hiking, I could just hear somewhere echoing across the lake. It was warm. There was nothing spectacular on this particular trip that I saw. There's an osprey. Maybe that was the one osprey I saw this trip. So there's that. And then there's a deer, a coos deer. Is that what that's called? Coos deer? Montosa Canyon. This was that stop where I had the lead on the 5-striped sparrow. I went up, I looked, I listened. Another bust. There's a flycatcher. I think at the time I labeled it as a Pacific Slope / Cordilleran flycatcher, but now I can go back and change it to Western flycatcher and get one more species counted for this trip, I think. But that's just the one thing I really saw when I was hanging out there. Again, it started to get warm and late in the day and things just got really quiet. Out to Santa Rita Lodge in the Santa Rita Mountains now. You can tell in this photo, it's getting pretty dark. I'm kind of using every ounce of sunlight to be on the move. We are not hanging out and kicking our feet up if there's sun out. Madera Canyon, my big draw for here was elegant trogons. Again, this is kind of the big specialty species. I really wanted to see this bird. There's the turkey's not supposed to be until last. He's hiding some photos of birds. Oh no. Oh well. I did not see a trogon. I went specifically to where people on eBird had said they had seen them. I looked, I listened, I wandered for the longest time. It just wasn't happening. At this point, I was starting to wonder if by coming in mid-September, have I missed the time of the year where these birds have any real reason to vocalize? They may not necessarily be trying to hold down a territory or communicate with a mate. Some of these birds may have just flat out left the area by now. And I wondered if maybe if I had have come maybe a month sooner, would I have gotten lucky? The one savior species of the day was the Townsend's warbler. Behind this turkey, just close your eyes and imagine. There are pictures of painted redstarts. I think I've got more photos of them later, so it is, it's fine. But then turkeys are pretty common in Madera Canyon as well. Oh man, yeah, I've got whatever. There's more of this coming. I think another slide messed up a little bit here. After Santa Rita Lodge, or I'm sorry, Madera Canyon, I wrapped this day up about noon and just kind of thought, now what do I do with the rest of my day? I got on eBird. What are some reports people have had lately? This De Anza Trail down in Tubac specifically, people had very frequently been reporting the rose-throated Bacards. They said they nest there and they're there, and people that day had seen them. And I went and I looked and I listened. I didn't see them. I mean, there were other nice things along the way. There's another black phoebe. Looking back in these photos, this is a yellow warbler right here. But then when I was looking back in these photos, I'm wondering if this is a varied bunting, a female. They're very plain and nondescript. I'm not going to go back and change my eBird list or anything, but I wonder if that's my lifer varied bunting right there. By this point, I have forgotten what kind of flycatcher that is. Anybody want to shout out a guess? Great. Makes me feel better. So I did find the nests of the rose-throated Bacard. I didn't know what to be on the lookout for. I didn't know what their nests looked like, but I found these two gigantic hanging baskets. And then I remembered people had said, oh, they were near the nest. And I Googled what their nest looked like. And sure enough, that's what it is. So I found their nest site. I just wasn't lucky that day. I did find a northern water thrush. It flagged as rare for that location in that season. So I don't know. I guess that's my big win for this particular trip. We're getting into the late afternoon now. I figure I'm going to head back up north back towards Santa Rita Lodge. I get back on eBird. What's rare? What can I look for? A woman had reported varied buntings at this Canoa Ranch conservation area, this park. This is a good location because it's right off of the interstate, like right off of it. It takes you no time to add it to a travel. As soon as I get there, I've got more pictures of it later, but there is a black swift flying around. That was cool. By the end of my trip here, as I was getting back in my car and leaving, all of the local birders were starting to gather. They were multiplying, so I knew that this must have been a pretty special bird for them. This was a really nice finish to the day, though. There were a lot of things, I guess, migrating through and using this spot as a pit stop. There were tons of those vermilion flycatchers. I took a photo of every single one about 5 times because at first I thought maybe this is a different species of flycatcher. Like there's yellow up under the flanks. Maybe it's something else, but these are all the same species, just different ages. Or maybe that's a female. This one is as confused as I am about where we are. Where to go. There were 3 roadrunners there, and 2 of them were hanging out at the top of this tree. You could see them for a long ways off, and so I got really good pictures of roadrunners. I was really happy about that, so that was a win. Lots and lots of kingbirds, cassins, and western. A few different kind of riparian things. There's a photo of a common yellow-throat. How about that? Wow. Blue grosbeak. And then with all of those birds comes something to eat the birds. Luckily, this Cooper's hawk showed up right about when I was getting ready to leave, so it timed up pretty well with me. And then here we are, my last day. I'm just going from Santa Rita Lodge up to my flight, basically. But along the way, I did make a couple of pit stops. Those Sweetwater wetlands I wanted to make a point to visit. I ended up not spending a ton of time there, or I got out the door at Santa Rita Lodge early, and I stopped at the Tucson Audubon's Mason Center, which produced this like actually good photo of a black-throated sparrow. And then I shot on up to my flight. That morning, I thought, okay, I'm going to do one last shot at this stupid trogon. I had gotten a lot more intel. There is a sign within Santa Rita Lodge that says, are you looking for a trogon? Go down this trail, sit in this bench, and look at that tree, and there's where it is. And I followed those instructions, and I didn't see it. But Santa Rita Lodge is 1 mile downhill from those trailheads. You can drive up there and park at those trailheads for like $8 a day or something. I was kind of financially lazy about it, and I decided to just hike up the hill. I was like, 1 mile is only 20 minutes. So I got out the door at 6 a.m. on the dot, hiked up, hung out on this Carrie Nation trail for as long as I could before I knew I needed to hit the road. And it just didn't happen. No trogons, pretty quiet. Actually, my whole eBird list from that particular morning was really low, just not a lot going on. But at that Tucson Audubon Center, there's an actual Costas hummingbird. So there was my one for this trip. Sweetwater wetlands, nice photo of a verdin. Verdin, I noticed, were more common as you got closer to people. I don't know if I saw one in Sierra Vista. Oh, no, I did. But when I saw them, it would be like at bird feeders or at a house or at some kind of development. I felt that as I got into more and more remote places, I saw less and less of them. Okay, so from these 5 or so days, I got 129 species. I thought that was pretty good considering 8 days before, I didn't know what I was doing. I got 26 lifers, so I was very happy with this trip. Fast forward, why did I go back? The first reason was I got back, Tally and I were on a DFO field trip together and carpooled, and I ended up talking to her about this trip. And then later on, she asked, would I come and present here? And I was like, I would love to, except I didn't take pictures enough to like have some kind of a decent presentation, but I guess I could go back. If you insist, Tally. So she twisted my arm. There were a number of birds that I would have really liked to get that are very specific to that region that were not on my radar. I didn't even know to be on the lookout for them, or I just got unlucky. So the green kingfisher, crested caracaras, Mexican chickadee. Notice the map is different. I had to source this guy's map from eBird because it wasn't on the Cornell All About Birds, because I guess it's not like an American species. I don't know. The Montezuma quail. I know. These are not my photos. These are all yanked from the internet. Harris's hawk, varied bunting, the elegant trogon. Here's that bird that I've been talking about. Now you get it. You're like, I too would really like to see that. And there's that rose-throated Bacard. So these are great birds, and I just didn't see them, didn't even know to look for them, one of the two. The Mexican chickadee was very specifically way over in the Chiricahuan Mountains on the east side of Whitewater Draw and Cochise County. I came nowhere near that bird. But again, I don't even think I knew to be on the lookout for it. So anyway, trip planning started much earlier this time. It wasn't a desperate panic attack. I planned this back in April of this past year. But I knew where I wanted to go back to. I knew where I wanted to add on. I knew it was a good idea to leave big gaps in travel itineraries just to, do I want to chase a rarity? Do I need to change my plan? Do I want to bail on something? Another great thing I did this time was I left Denver early and I was on the ground at 7 a.m. in Phoenix. So I had the full day ahead of me. It was like, I mean, at a certain point I was like, what if I flew here every weekend? Or like once a month, and then I just got right back on the plane and 2-day trip. It's not that long of a flight. I'm not going to do that, but you could. And I wanted to go to this Boyce Thompson Arboretum. There were a lot of things I wanted to go here. This long URL, this was the application I could pre-print and fill out ahead of time to get into Fort Huachuca. Here's some coordinates for a 5-striped sparrow. Here's a coordinates for a black-capped gnatcatcher, coordinates for another sparrow. So I would have added these in just before leaving for the trip of things to go chase. This time, there's my budget right there. This time, this trip came in just shy of $2,000. For 7 days, I feel like that was pretty good, but we all have our different values. I decided to make home bases the same exact places. I picked the same Airbnb and I went to Santa Rita Lodge again. I thought those were both great. I did get a different car this time. I got something with all-wheel drive. I got a 2019 Toyota RAV4. Didn't necessarily need it. There were a bunch of times where I was like, my Corolla could have handled this. I ended up not canceling, but just abandoning a few different things. By the time this day came around that I thought I might go to Huachuca Canyon, And then Car Canyon, by the time that rolled around, there just wasn't a bird I necessarily needed to go out there and get. Buenos Aires National Wildlife Refuge, again, by the time this day came, I just didn't know why I needed to go way out there. So I just kind of changed my plans. Now, very important when you're planning a trip, this is how I sustained myself when I'm birding from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. nonstop. Basically, I ate the same thing every day, which makes it very convenient because the first day you get there, you go to the grocery store and you get 6 or 7 of everything. So every day, this diet is all about efficiency and speed and on the go. So anything that requires cooking, like coffee, that is a lot of prep you got to do. Well, that was before the sun came up. We've got time. Every day for lunch, I'd have a can of soup. The can, very important that the can of soup has a pop tab so I can open it on the go in my car. Bonus points if the soup is liquidy enough that you can drink it from the can. Because at most times I was not stopping to eat lunch. We are drinking our soup while we're driving. We got places to be. There was one day that I opened my soup and realized, oh no, this is chilly and I don't have a spoon. So I used like my Safeway card to like, there's a lot of moments like that where I was like, well, it's not gonna stop us. Trail mix, more protein bars for snacks. And then every day for dinner, microwavable dinner. And that's exactly the wine I got. I found a nice bottle of wine that was organic with a bird on it. So there, that was what I ate. I did use a calorie counter on a few days and this was enough. I was okay. An actual serious important part is water. So 2 things I brought that were really helpful was on the right there, it's like a 5-gallon collapsible foldable water cube. I was just able to put that in my carry-on. And then I have this running Camelback hydration pack. I don't run. If you do ever see me run, you need to be running too. But it's so lightweight and you can carry 2 liters of water, but your hands are free. And then it's got your chapstick and your sunscreen, very important. And camera, battery, phone, external battery pack for your cell phone for when you're using eBird and Merlin for hours on end and you're in the middle of nowhere. And then what I found helpful was every night I would half fill the water cube, put it in the freezer, and then in the morning fill up the rest of the way. So the water was kind of cool all day. This second trip was hot. There were a couple of days where it was 107. It got up there. I didn't mention this, but that first trip, when I got off the plane, I went to that riparian preserve in the middle of Phoenix. That was the hottest place I've ever been in my life. I grew up in the Southeast, always having outdoor jobs and working. And that was the one time in my whole life that I was like, I'm going to be in physical trouble if I don't leave right now. And I'm a lizard person. I don't drink water and I just thrive in the heat. But that was truly the one place that I was like, this is the hottest I've ever seen or experienced. Okay, so now we are on the trip just a couple of months ago that Tally forced me to go on. It was not sponsored by Aiken, but you know, anyway. But this time it was 7:15. That is the time that I messaged my Turo renter guy. Hey, I'm in, thanks. But I picked up that rental car, went straight to the riparian preserve because it was a spectacular place. Went to Boyce Thompson Arboretum. I missed it on my last trip. And then by the time I was leaving there, it was time to head on down to try to get there before sunset. The riparian preserve again, a month earlier this time. So I think the only ducks I saw might have been mallards. It was okay. I think it was about comparable with the last time I had been. There are a number of trails, really nice interpretive signs. All the little trails are called like Warbler Way and apparently Owl Clover Trail. A lot of hummingbirds, verdin, black-crowned night heron. Yeah, and then I went to Panera Bread. Wait, go back. I was in I was hungry at this point. I hadn't eaten. I got off the plane and went straight birding, obviously. But then I was really hungry, thirsty, hot. I went through the Panera Bread drive-through line, and then right in front of me is a cactus wren. And I got out my camera thinking, what if this is the only cactus wren I see on this whole trip? It would not be. I would hear them nonstop in the distance in the background. But I got really excited. And so I have one eBird list at Panera Bread. I ended up parking right behind the Panera Bread and just eating my food right there. But I had an eBird running the whole time. And there were also curve-billed thrashers and white-winged doves. And so even just the Panera Bread parking lot, good birding. Off to Boyce Thompson Arboretum, really nice, lovely place. There was a plant sale happening. And if only I just figured I didn't have room in my carry-on for a cactus. But tons of walking trails and labeled plants, really nice area. This is where I checked my phone. It was 107 degrees. Ended up still seeing a lot of birds. By this point, I started to think, wouldn't it be funny if I made a collection of birds with their mouths open? It was really common on that day. Cactus wren on a cactus, amazing. He was eating this prickly pear. Ladder-backed woodpecker, our cardinal, vermilion flycatcher. At one point, I saw this one branch like dripping with birds through the brush, and it was all these lesser goldfinches. And I thought, what's going on over there? Why are there such a little compact group of birds? There was a water feature right under it, and you better believe all the birds were on that water feature this day. Just the hottest birds of ash-throated flycatcher. And then right here, right in front of his feet, there's a viceroy. The butterfly, yeah. One of the things that kind of mimics a monarch, but I noticed that well after I took this photo. So this looks like a flicker, right? Like a northern flicker that we have around here. That's what I like to hear. Honestly, I put this up here validating that this was a gilded flicker because I was very excited. This is a live bird. I didn't think that I had seen one at all on my first trip, but as soon as I turned around and saw this bird, I thought, that's not a northern flicker, right? Is that gilded flicker? And so I took as many photos as I could, looked up on my phone, and I was like, sweet, that's a gilded flicker. So as hot as it was, this was kind of my prize bird of this particular day. And I walked around this place for as long as I could until someone on a golf cart drove up and said, we close in 5 minutes. It's like, I'm going. But I needed to hit the road anyway. And bless those people's hearts, like they needed to go home. It was hot. So this second day, I went back to that Escapule wash that I liked so much. I had to go back to Ash Canyon, Beatty's Guest Rent, the Miller Canyon, Ramsey Canyon Preserve. So this time I'm starting up here, going all the way down, working my way back up. This time around, I did have time to go to the water treatment facility, the EOP, the Environmental Operations Park. After that, I still had some time, some daylight left over. You can't waste that. So I realized I was really close to the San Pedro house, which is a hot spot I had missed before. So I ended up going to get kind of a taste test of that and then back up. Here is better pictures of that Escapule wash that I really liked. Basically, it is a dried creek bed that goes across the road, and you just park and go under this barbed wire fence and walk this dried creek bed until you do eventually get to the San Pedro River. I don't know if it had any flow to it. I think it was just big puddle after big puddle. I don't know. There was not a lot of water in the region at this time. But there was just enough water here to attract, there was a great blue heron as soon as I arrived down at the river. Along the way, vermilion flycatchers again. I think I labeled this as it was a New World flycatcher or something like that. I don't think I ever landed on what this might be. Blue grosbeaks everywhere on this trip, by the way. Here's an actual Pyrloxia, not a cardinal. So good desert bird. Summer tanager. This whole trip, if I was anywhere near cottonwoods, willows, if I was in a riparian area, there were constantly summer tanagers chirping and calling and singing off in the distance. So at a certain point, I started treating them like chickadees where, okay, I hear it, check, I get it. This image might be hard to see. It's a rock that is wet with a little spring coming out. And all these dots are bees going along this little wash that ends at the river. Some parts were wet if they were really shaded. Most of it was dry, but the parts that were wet were covered in insects. There was this one wasp that had to have been like this big and jet black with bright orange wings. And there was a lot of them. And I just had that moment of like, we did the pep talk of if I don't hurt them, they won't hurt me. If I don't hurt them, they won't hurt me. Because it was either go through this swarm of them or stop birding and go back to the car. So I just walked through the swarm and we were all good. We were all friends. I later found out those are tarantula hawks and they have the second most painful sting in the insect world. However, they're very chill and they only sting if you really bother them. They have no natural predators because everything knows exactly what they are and no one wants to mess with them. So you can, if you see them, you can trust them. It's fine. I have seen one flying around Fountain Creek Regional Park, so we do get them in this area too. They're cool though. Gray hawk. I had been hearing it the whole time I'm walking this trail, and I spent probably 10 minutes searching for this thing. I just couldn't see it, even though it was all out in the open. It was just way up at the top of the tree, sounding like it was closer than it was, very loud. I had seen this bird the previous year, but this was my first photograph of it. Headed down to Ash Canyon Bird Sanctuary again. This time they have a QR code that you can scan and donate instead of putting cash in a drop box. And that really suits my lifestyle. So I did do that. I rounded up a little. And then if you're looking for Christmas presents, I think I like this. All the parking spots are labeled birder parking. But you go in and it's just a ton of bird feeders, mostly hummingbird feeders. The one species you mostly have to get while you're here is that Lucifer hummingbird. And I did end up getting it again, but there's just tons of seating. You just sit around. All the feeders are numbered at all these different places. So you can say Lucifer hummingbird, feeder 3, very convenient. Ladderback woodpecker again, a little party going on. Maybe that's there's a black chin, another black chin. Maybe that's could be Anna's maybe. And maybe a broad-billed, if I had to guess. The only 2 hummingbirds that I didn't get were the 2 that everyone I asked about, the volunteers, the people that live down here, they were like, no, we don't really get those. It was the Allen's hummingbird and the ruby-throated hummingbird. But every other thing I did get. Spoiler alert. While I'm here, there's that Mexican jay again. There's a verdin hanging out on a piece of fruit, orange. There's that Lucifer hummingbird, maybe the same one from the year before. And then do you see how this hummingbird is bigger than this one? This was not on my radar. I just got lucky and showed up while it was there. This is the plain-capped starthroat. Is that right? Pretty drab. I think it's supposed to have more of a reddish gorget when it's actually in breeding plumage, but people were going bonkers for it, and it perched on a branch for 20 of us. We were all shoulder to shoulder getting our pictures. And it hung out for a long while. And then just for fun, I think this is Anna's hummingbird, just looking very fat and content. Up Miller Canyon, the next canyon at Beatty's Guest Ranch, you know you've arrived when it looks like you're at Jurassic Park. You park your car, you walk through this gate, there's a little box here that requests $5. Well, they didn't have a QR code. So once again, I just walked on through. But as you walk up this road, eventually, not far on your left, you see this cute little hummingbird sign, and it says to go that way. And there you go up to your stadium seating, your bleachers, your steel bleachers, and watch all the swarms. So Rivoli's hummingbird, the violet-crowned hummingbird, just big hummingbirds, by the way. And then there's that white-eared hummingbird, the male again. So check, check, check. I don't know if I was there that long. I think one more change to my itinerary I made this year was the first year I had budgeted like 2 hours for this spot. And then I got there and was like, oh, you sit in one place, bird for 15 minutes until all the species have showed up and you're good to go. And unless you want to hang out longer. So I didn't need to spend as much time here just to get the species. You can stay longer and just enjoy. Down to Ramsey Canyon Preserve. We're going for that trogon. I ask everyone, there are rumblings. It's been seen today. It likes this tree. It starts heading this direction at this time. There's volunteers on site and they know the whereabouts and kind of the daily habits of these birds. I know which sycamores to be on the lookout for them in. So I'm out, I'm looking. They have hummingbird feeders too, so good to look there. They had a few interesting species here this trip. They had a Barrelines hummingbird hanging out, and they had a blue-throated mountain gem hanging out, so those were good to see. More of that coming. Hey, there's a painted redstart. So they told me, you know where the old field station is? I knew where that was from the year before. It's just off screen here. They said, well, across from that, there's a huge tree, and around it is this bush with blueberries. And that's where they've been hanging out, and they hang out and they come down and they eat the berries. And I didn't see anything. I hung out for the longest time. At one point, I did hear them very distantly. It's like this really hoarse, raspy bark. And I hear it way off. I put it on eBird because like it's there, I hear it, but boy, that's unsatisfying, right? So I heard it, I didn't see it. I did consolation, I mean, sulfur-bellied flycatcher. Blurry photo, I'm good with it. This was my lifer right here. They make a really cute rubber ducky squeak noise. Wink, wink. I've started to forget what they all sound like now, but during this week, you better believe I knew everything. When you don't talk to humans for 7 days, you get to know the bird songs really quickly. So I no official trogon, but I got the sulfur-bellied flycatcher. This was another day that I was there until they were like, you know, we close in 5 minutes. We're gonna close that gate. And I was the last person there. The volunteer had locked the door and was waiting for me. She wasn't tapping her feet. She was very nice, and I thanked her. So I head off to this Sierra Vista Environmental Operations Park. I saw on eBird that morning or the day before, someone had seen an American bittern, a least bittern, one of the bitterns, and just there's good birds here. And then I arrive and I'm like, oh my gosh, there's a viewing area. So I park, I'm the only one there. I walk up to this viewing platform to look out over the wetlands, and it's dry. And I mean, I couldn't have spent more than 5 minutes here. I think a distant flock of red-winged blackbirds went by, but it was quiet and there was nothing there. Then I turn around from this view right here. I turn around, there's a bulletin board, and there's a sign that says free bird walks. It's just they're scheduled, and I think they take you to private areas of this property that actually have vegetation and water and places that a bittern might like to hang out. That was not it. So one thing that was not on my radar, but if you're in this area, I encourage you to look up what bird walks they might be offering so you can get to better areas of this particular spot. But anyway, I got back in my car, turned around. Wasn't a total bust, as all of these trips are. On my way out, a roadrunner ran across the road. This second trip, I didn't get one single picture of a roadrunner because every single time they just ran across the road. So no time for photos. I still had time at the end of the day. The San Pedro house was just like 5-10 minutes down the road, easy, quick drive. So I went down there, didn't spend a ton of time because it was getting kind of stormy and kind of dark, and there's lightning on the horizon. I thought I shouldn't be here. But you walk across this big arid grassland and you end up in this riparian area along that San Pedro River. Along the way, blue grosbeaks everywhere, Gila woodpecker. This black dot right here, this is one of those tarantula hawks, and that Gila woodpecker was keeping an eye on it. And the tarantula hawk, by the way, they're pollinators. They just go to flowers and get nectar. They're called a tarantula hawk because when it is time for a female to lay eggs, they go and paralyze a tarantula, lay their egg in it. That's the only reason why they're so gnarly. Otherwise, they're just peaceful little wasps huge wasps that go, peaceful huge wasps that pollinate flowers. I think that's a yellow warbler. Yeah. So I pulled over on my way back to my Airbnb because I thought, oh, I should take a picture of what the scenery is like. And I pull into this little pull off on the dirt road and bam, family of quail coming down the road right in front of me. So I take pictures and videos of this mom and dad, and they're like 3 chicks, I think they had, quail just kind of roaming around. Then I hear a little squeak noise. It always reminds me of prairie dogs. And I look out my passenger window, and right outside of it, there's a canyon towhee sitting there. But this is kind of the scenery of the Airbnb that I chose. There's the house that the couple lives, and I'm in a little guest house right next to it. So really remote, but there's friendly people screaming distance away. And then it's not over yet. I get back, you see how dark it is, but there's a pyraloxia just on the suet feeder, because remember, they had a lot of great bird feeders here. And I took this photo through the kitchen window, but just cool, pyraloxia on my bird feeder. So the next morning, obviously, had to spend more time at the house itself. Back to the San Pedro house, because I liked what I had seen the day before. Also, someone on eBird said they had seen a green kingfisher down there. I look on a map, and there is a spot within this area called Kingfisher Pond. Obviously, I'm going to go there. After that, I'm going to go back to Ramsey Canyon Preserve. I think this may have been the day that I had planned to maybe go to Huachuca, Fort Huachuca and Carr Canyon, but I abandoned that in favor of going else. I wanted to go back to Ramsey Canyon because I'm going to get this stupid Trogon. And then I wanted to go down to Coronado National Memorial down here, kind of right at the border, specifically there for the Montezuma quail. People had reported them pretty regularly. At the end of the day, I ended up having a little extra time. I went to Ash Canyon Bird Sanctuary because on their social media, they said that it was very normal that the Montezuma quail would come in the evenings to drink from a little water feature they had there. And then I went back to bird my Airbnb. So staying in that Sierra Vista area all this day. So San Pedro House and Trails, this time I went through their kind of bird feeder courtyard. This is what I'm talking about, those Gila woodpeckers swarmed. At one point, there were 8 of them on 3 hummingbird feeders, just all down, little yellow wash on their belly, white-winged doves. As I'm walking across that kind of arid grassland toward that riparian area, toward this Kingfisher Pond that I felt very confident about, kestrels, vermilion flycatchers, and then this dove comes and lands in the trail right in front of me. And I'm always nervous about some of these new species. I knew common ground dove was a possibility, but I was worried that I would see one and assume it was a mourning dove. No, as soon as I saw this thing, I was like, this is the cutest dove I've ever seen in my life. It was so tiny, little short stumpy tail. And I ended up seeing and hearing them pretty frequently after this one instance. And then you can tell we're getting closer to that riparian zone when we start hearing and seeing. You're right, I do say we a lot. Maybe I had an imaginary friend with me. But the yellow-breasted chats. And then I get to Kingfisher Pond. And it has not had water in it in a while. And I'm like, well, here we are. Don't know where to go now. There's always the silver lining in all of these grasses and rushes around the edge of what could have been a pond at one point. It was chock filled. You see that little blue dot and this yellow dot? Lesser goldfinches and lazuli buntings. I mean, dozens of them. Usually I feel like when we see lazuli buntings here, it's like one here, one there. They must have been on their migration because it was truly dozens. I probably put over 30 on my list just right here, hopping around in these grasses. So that was really nice to see. And it was just really pretty, like these riparian corridors where you've got those towering cottonwoods, and it is pretty lush for how I've been talking about it, so dry. But it's just really pretty to be there, birds or no. All right, we're back at Ramsey Canyon. There's our acorn woodpecker. There's our turkeys to greet you at the front. I go back to those bushes under the tree that have the berries. There's a black-headed grosbeak there. That's nice. Ain't no trogons. I was happy this day though, because there was an Arizona woodpecker. The year before where I had seen it, I had hiked up the hill quite a bit, started kind of huff and puff. This was very close to the trailhead. I'd have to do zero work. I was asking volunteers that I encountered where to go, where to look, what to see. They were pointing out, this was the bearline hummingbird's nest. There's that violet-capped hummingbird still on a nest. So we were still at the end of breeding season. I did encounter quite a few nests, either brooding or incubating, I mean, or just having active, those little naked chicks on there, you know? So a much better time in terms of hearing things. And then it's hard to tell because it's from behind. You can tell this is a bigger hummingbird, right? Luckily, there's this handy guide right next to it. This is the blue-throated mountain gem. So I got this picture of it, not a super picture, but whatever, I saw it, it's cool. So got a little bit of mess up there. I went down to Coronado National Memorial. By the way, as I was leaving Ramsey Canyon, I hear thunder in the distance, don't think much of it. As I leave Ramsey Canyon, there's a wall of gray, and I drive into it, rain, whatever, right? Then it turns to hail, and then I'm like, that's fine, there's a gas station up here, I'll just pull under. Well, like 50 other people in Sierra Vista had that same idea. And so I just kept driving, got the Colorado chicken pox in that particular car. Then I got lucky because after a few more days in the heat, they all like popped out. And so I never had to report that damage. But there were quite a few dents in the hood of that car. One kind of nice thing about this down here, there was not another soul there pretty much, unless I saw the occasional park ranger. I popped into the visitor center thinking that like another national park, you would have to pay, but there was no fee, I guess because it's a memorial. This pesky video is here. It got kind of out of the layer, but this was driving up the mountain, as you know, switchbacks indicated by my cursor there. But looking back, you see that wall of gray that I had come out of. I get up to the top of this area and hey, there's a golden eagle. That's a win. Here is the view from the top of this, maybe. I think that might be the border wall down there. So we're looking, there was Mexico. We're looking back into Arizona. And while I was up here, as I was hiking up to this point from the parking lot, I saw this little storm, a brewing in the lowland down below. And I was watching it come my direction. And I just was walking really fast thinking, I can get to the top here, look around and get back in my car before it starts raining. That didn't happen. But the good news was that it would form, start moving toward the mountain, maybe get that elevation change and then just break and be done. And then I watched that happen like 2 or 3 more times. It was really interesting. But as I was at the top of this and looking down, I see that there's a road I can drive down to the border wall. And I had joked with some people before this trip that I wanted to go up to the border wall, stick my head through it, and then bird on that side to get a Mexico checklist. So that was my plan. I'm going to drive down there. Also through binoculars, scouting the road ahead, there was this little pond. And I thought, well, that's on the way. I got to go check out this pond. On the way, I see movement up ahead on the road and going up the hillside. There was a gray fox with her kit just hanging out. And so this is very zoomed in. I didn't know I put a video. Maybe I didn't. Oh, that was the video from before. I keep going and this thing runs across the road. And by across the road, I mean it runs out from in front of my car where it had been the whole time and I just didn't see it. That's a Montezuma quail. It's blurry, but good enough to prove it. He had been right in front in the middle of the road and it didn't pop out until I was, I don't know, 12 feet from him. I don't know how good their life preservation skills are. Got this blurry photo. And then his girlfriend ran out in front of the car, from in front of the car. So sweet, lifer, easy. I guess that's the bird I came to the spot for. I get to this little wetland and just like earlier that day, tons and tons of lazuli buntings everywhere around the perimeter of this thing. Lots of other things too. At this point, I'm like, it's getting late. I've had a great day. Do I really need to drive like the 2 more miles to this border wall and do this silly stick my head through it kind of a thing? It's like, what if I just don't? So I end up driving back. I took this photo just because it was a really pretty. So I head back to Ash Canyon. My plan was to hope for the Montezuma quail. I had seen them, but I was hoping to get better pictures of them, not those blurry Bigfoot photos. Didn't see them there, started getting a little bored after a while. But there's a decent photo of our broad-billed hummingbird. Curve-billed thrasher hopping up on the bird feeder. Now, as I'm driving back through Sierra Vista, I see this big chocolate brown, it wasn't that big, but a chocolate brown hawk up on a pole. And I'm like, oh, Harris's hawk, oh my gosh. And so I could have left skid marks in the road from pulling around, I don't know. And I go and I park and it's just a Dartmoor Swainson's hawk. But I wasted my time, so you have to as well. There he is. Back at the guest house, again, I think this is through the kitchen window. Just the lighting is really good. All the bird feeders are filled. The pyraloxia is back. The black-headed grosbeak's there. Vermilion flycatcher hanging out on a yard ornament. Curve-billed thrasher bopping around. Blue grosbeak. There's a really good photo of the stick right behind a black-throated sparrow. I was so excited for this photo, and then it just didn't happen. And then another beautiful sunset. I'm sorry, what? Black. Oh, it's a stick right there. And then the black-throated sparrow. Pretty sunset. If there's any millennials in the house, there's Littlefoot's mom. Oh, I got one. There you go. Thank you. You just met. Oh, don't get excited. This was part 1. One of the how do I want you to go away? How do I exit full screen? My other PowerPoint's just down here. Tyler, do I need to unshare? You got to go to the bathroom. Now's your chance. Oh boy, I got to speed through the next part. Yeah, that's it. Here we are. All right, we're close. I'm going to pick up the pace a little bit. Originally this day, I was just going to go down to San Bernardino National Wildlife Refuge. It's right down here on the border. And my one goal bird there was the green kingfisher. And then I wanted to go to the Chiricahuas, go through Cave Creek to get that Mexican chickadee. So I had this big old trip planned for 2 birds. And then by that day, there had been a lot of reports of really cool birds up in Twin Lakes Golf Course in Wilcox. So I added a day. So I was on the road at 5 a.m. to get to San Bernardino by 6. Dang it, the video did that again. There's my fashion. So before I even get to San Bernardino, some bird flies across the road. I'm almost to San Bernardino. We're on dirt roads. There's the border wall right there. By the way, like once I got on this road, part of me wondered, like, is this going to be kind of sketchy, like a dirt road, middle of nowhere, the border's right there. The only people I passed were a couple of cowboys in trucks who did the two finger, the salute on the driver, the wheel. And so I was like, these are my people. They're friends out here. But I end up coming up over this hill. I'm stopped in the middle of the road chasing some bird that flew across. And I just come to a random like cow pond. And I spend a good bit of time here. Just lots of things popping up. This is where I got my lifer, Scott's Oriole. Tons of nighthawks flying all around, common nighthawk and lesser nighthawk, common poorwill and lesser nighthawk. I think I got that right. But just flying all around. I'm actively driving in this photo. Covey of quail right in the middle of the road. There's some awkward teenage Gambel's quail. What's that bird? Oh no, yeah, I don't know why the video's up already, but they're right behind, right here in this video. At one point I'm stopped, I've got my windows down, I hear this sparrow song. I don't know what it is, so it really interests me. I look out there and this sparrow comes out, flies up from the sagebrush, and then goes back down into it. And I thought, I've read about this behavior. I think I know what this is. I get Merlin out and it confirms it's a grasshopper sparrow. I'm sorry, not a grasshopper sparrow. Cassin sparrow, thank you. But this was my lifer Cassin sparrow. I know we get them in El Paso County every summer. I've just never seen one. Black-tailed gnatcatcher. I don't know how I got a decent photo of that bird, but I was just outside of my car pishing on the roadside and out it came. So that was a life bird. Man, I wish that video wasn't there. I wasted a lot of time because I didn't know how to get into the refuge. Looking only at aerial photos and maps, I thought I could just drive around in it. And so initially I passed this gate and parking area and I thought, no, there's a way for me to drive around in here. There's not. You have to park right here and walk in. So you walked like 2 miles through the desert to get to anywhere where there could be a green kingfisher. But it's fine because awaiting me at the parking spot was this nighthawk. There's another one. These things there were probably a dozen of them flying around for the first 3 to 4 hours of the day. Hey, I found a map. So there's where I parked, and you have to walk just straight through that sagebrush desert. And eventually you'll get to this river that is just a dried river. And then I'm aiming for these 5 wetland cells because that's where someone had reported 3 green kingfishers less than a week before. And this is just another view of that hike through the desert to that riparian zone. And then I saw a sign that really makes the birders go wild. I was like, what? So excited. Oh man, just out of, unfortunately, behind this video that popped up early, there's the border wall and there's a Gila woodpecker sitting right on the top of it. So I finally get down and around to these wetland cells, and it's really rewarding. I assume that, oh, sorry, there's a picture of a pied-billed grebe right behind there now. A few pied-billed grebes and coots nesting and being active in there. Tons more buntings. So more lazuli, buntings. Unfortunately, behind this ugly photo of me, there's a painted bunting. Now, something interesting down here was as I entered through that gate initially, 2 National Wildlife Refuge employees passed by in a truck and they acted like they had never seen a human here before. And they looked like they were my age. At least one of them was a girl with brown hair and she just drove by and was like, and then as I was hiking around, periodically the 2 of them would pass me in their ATV as they're doing trail work and we would, but I don't know. I felt like they're there, so I'm good to go here. I inserted this photo. This video. I put it on Snapchat while I was there because, hey, I had a cell phone service, but mostly for the fashion. You can see, notice the caked layer of sunscreen on my upper lip. Oh, maybe not. That's fine. Oh. So again, I'm alone. I got no one to look good for. We're sun protection. It was not, it sounded sarcastic. It wasn't. I was genuinely like, it's a nice time. I'm still looking for those kingfishers, but I'm like, this is nice. But sun protection up, sunscreen, long sleeves, long pants, wide brim hat. We ain't messing around. No, I don't want to see this again. There's a vermilion flycatcher and a lazuli bunting up top. I feel like there's some kind of artful metaphor about the red, white, and blue with the border behind there. I'm not artsy. You can put the pieces together for yourself, but I thought that was kind of cool. Down to Slaughter Ranch. Initially, I thought I would actually park here and walk into the refuge from here, but when I got there, the gate was closed. I got to start doing more research before I show up to places. But I did end up going back in on the way out. It's $5 to hang out, but when I mentioned, oh, I'm just here for birding, I'm not here for like the ranch and historical stuff, they said, oh, never mind, you don't have to pay anything. And I just spent maybe the better part of an hour walking around. There's a cute pond here, pied-billed grebes, green heron, vermilion flycatcher. And then the Cassin's kingbirds were making this huge racket. And I finally figured out why. It's a great horned owl. So then I drive up to Cave Creek Canyon. At this point, I had no cell service. And so I popped in the visitor center and took a million photos of all the maps they had and put my finger on where I need to try to go and where turnoffs are. Very nice volunteer there that had a trogon on her t-shirt. And so I was like, ma'am, you need to tell me where the trogons are. And she told me to go down to the South Fork trailhead and walk around, and they're pretty common there. So that's where I headed first. And here's what it looks like as you're driving in, and here's looking from the parking lot back down the road. It happened. Yeah. As soon as I park and I start down the trail, there's a couple. One of them is looking down in a Sibley, and the other one's pointing up in a tree. And I was like, well, this is a pretty good sign. And I'm like, hey, what you guys looking at? And they said, there's a trogon up there, we're pretty sure. And we watched it fly, and she actually flew over our cars down the parking lot and settled in some grape leaves down here right at the front of the parking lot. And I just got to watch her kind of fly around and eat those grapes off of those vines. So it's a female. I don't care if I see a male. We're here to check off this species. We got good looks. We're happy. Continuing up the Chiricahuas through the Cave Creek area, we're at the Southwestern Research Station. At this point, I had already seen the barrelines, and I had already seen the blue-throated mountain gem. That was my one species to get very specifically at this place right here. I had already seen them both, but I figured, well, I'm here, I gotta stop and look. Same deal, lots of bird feeders to look at. Right here in the parking lot underneath somebody's car was a yellow-eyed junco. Got a photo because this was my first one of this particular trip. But you can hang out, watch the bird feeders for a while. Here is a better photo of that blue-throated mountain gem, and then you can just see how much bigger they are than the hummingbirds we're familiar with. Spoiler alert, I got the Mexican chickadee. So heading farther up, I had also asked the nice volunteer with the trogon shirt, also, ma'am, may I please place my order for a Mexican chickadee? And she told me go up to the Rustler Park campground. I was there for a good while before I finally saw it. I don't think I ever even heard it. And I was glad I went though, even if I hadn't have seen this chickadee, because it totally didn't occur to me all the other things that I might see here that I would not see anywhere else on my trip. There were red crossbills and pygmy and red-breasted nuthatches and a Steller's jay and these other montane species that, yeah, maybe we see them here, but it just wasn't on my Arizona bingo card. And so even just waiting on this one chickadee to show up, I was pretty happy. And if I had a dollar for every deer that I saw driving through this mountain range, I might, yeah, pay for the trip. I finally got to Wilcox. It was like 30 minutes shy of sunset. This was a rushed day. And if I could change one thing, or next time I go back, I would give myself one full day in the Chiricahuas. There were a few things not on my radar that I realized I could have potentially gotten an olive warbler. Didn't think about it at the time, but if next time I go, I would like to spend a whole day in that mountain area. So I didn't have a lot of time, pretty poor light, ibis, more black-necked stilts, lots and lots of shorebirds, ducks. I also got scaled quail in Wilcox, so I had hit my quail trifecta. Wednesday, we're getting close to the end of the trip. We do that same loop where we're leaving Sierra Vista and headed to Santa Rita Lodge. Hey, there's my Aiken Audubon hat. I was representing. So we're in Patagonia. We're at the Patton Center for Hummingbirds. Just to set the scene a little bit, lots of trails to walk. They have a pollinator garden. You can walk this dry creek bed, and hey, there's what the birders like to see. There's some wastewater being dumped out, so you always got to check that out. Along the way, there were a ton of phainopepala there, and I noticed them feeding on whatever kind of berry this was. Lots of turkey vultures. We're still kind of early in the morning. I was somewhat on time this day. But lots of turkey vultures hanging out, enough, I guess, that they put up a turkey vulture house. I was just, yes, it is. But now I know who knows what a bat box is. And then when I was checking out these vultures on this hill, I noticed this is a weird looking kingbird. This was, if I'm remembering the name of it, the thick-billed kingbird. And this was my lifer, good picture, good view of it. So this was one of those actual different kingbirds that I thought would have been more prevalent. We head off to Patagonia Lake State Park. I had anticipated pulling off on that rest stop to look for the rose-throated bacards again. I didn't because it was under construction or something. So I headed straight to Patagonia Lake. Walking along this birding trail, better time than before. The trail had been cleared a little. It was quiet. Saw quite a few actually yellow-billed cuckoos. As I'm looking at this cuckoo, a guy comes around the corner on the trail. He says, "Have you seen the yellow-billed cuckoo?" I point to it, we're looking at it, and he asks, "Have you seen this guy? He's my friend, I lost him on the trail." No, I haven't, good luck. We talk about the thick-billed kingbird, he wants to see them. I tell him about where I had just seen one, we part ways. I later encounter him on the trail, he's with his group this time. So I'm like, hey, by the way, there's a thick-billed kingbird right up here on the trail. I had just turned around from the end. My goal bird of this particular location was the rufous-capped warbler, a Mexican rarity that had recently been seen here quite a bit. And people that morning I passed on the trail told me exactly where it was. They showed me on a map. I go to that place, I look, I listen, nothing, I gotta go. I end up passing this guy again, and I tell him about the birds. And as we're all talking about the birds, there's one guy in the group that I'm like, "I'm sorry, you are so familiar. What is your name?" He's like, "I'm Nick Komar." He is a birder here in Colorado. He is currently doing a big year. I haven't checked on who's in the lead, but a few weeks ago, he was number 3. So I was in the same place at the same time as someone going for a big year, which made me feel like I have really planned a good trip. I have chosen good places at good times. And we talk about the rufous-capped warbler. I'm like, you know what? I only just turned around. I'll show you where that mud is. You don't know the landmarks we use in birding. There's a mud patch. I'll show you where the mud is. I'll look a little bit with you. We go. He starts to play with our consent. I think a blue-headed vireo warning call and a screech owl noise, just to, it's bird drama. Get this warbler up looking for what's going on. He plays that for a little bit and it's all dead silent. You could hear a pin drop and I see movement. I get my binocs up. I see this warbler and I'm like, "Warbler, there it is, top of this willow, 8 feet up, 20 feet in." Everybody gets their binocs up. That thing is gone. it has dipped down. And then the next 5 minutes are dead silent as we're all just, and I'm like, oh my God, I saw it and nobody else saw it. And I just feel like a real schmuck right now. And at a certain point, I was like, well, I gotta go. Good luck, guys. The only reason I actually tell this story is the next day I saw they got a rufous-capped warbler outside Sierra Vista. They got pictures. They're okay. They got it. There's what this warbler looks like, by the way. So when I saw it, it was very distinctive, kind of wren-like. Yeah, it's kind of wren-like. On my hike back out, a little posse of coatimundi crossed my trail. They're really cute, but they're kind of terrifying in person. If you've ever encountered those really big raccoons we have in Colorado and they make you nervous, these things made me nervous. They're bigger and tougher looking. They remind me of feral pigs, actually. Up, continuing the Dianza Trail again, I'm looking for this rose-throated Picard and a green kingfisher. I go exactly, I know where I'm going. I know where these nests are. And I know to apparently other e-birders had reported, oh, it's 100 yards past the tire on the tree. And I'm finding these little landmarks and I'm looking and I'm listening and there's nothing. And at one point I hear a lesser goldfinch just right in the tree above me, which is another bird. You sometimes hear it. You don't necessarily need to look up at it. I decided to look up at it. And there's this other bird up there kind of close to it. And I don't know what this bird is, which is a good thing because it means it's something cool. And I take a bunch of pictures. I reference that it's a female or maybe a juvenile rose-throated Picard. I don't need to see that big, beautiful, pretty adult male. We're good here. It started to vocalize and then another one started to vocalize elsewhere. And I was like, you know what? We've got this one. I've got pictures. Let's go. So I was pretty happy I got him. Still one more rarity point. It might be in this photo somewhere. We can sit here and look for it. This time it's another gnatcatcher. The black-capped gnatcatcher had been reported in these exact coordinates that day, the day before. So I went, I stood, I looked, I listened, and by golly, 2 of them flew through. I had Merlin ID running because first I heard them and it sounded gnatcatchery. And finally they came through, Merlin ID'd them. I got some pictures. Again, my gnatcatcher photo luck was pretty decent on this trip. So bing, bang, boom, 10 minutes, got another rarity. Woohoo, check. Stopped at Canoa Ranch Conservation Area again. Here's better pictures. It's a really beautiful place and it's very flat. Interpretive signs all around, wetland, pond. This redhead, I wonder if it's like a resident there. The year before I saw one redhead on this pond. And then this time I saw one redhead. I wonder if this is the Stumpy of, if you're familiar with that broken-winged pied-billed grebe at Fountain Creek, I wonder if it's just stuck here. Nothing particularly interesting here that day. It was not like the year before where it was just covered in migrants. Although, as I passed this hole in the ground, I happened to see it right as I was walking by and I saw movement. And it took me a minute to realize what that movement had been. Here's another bonus to traveling alone. You can stare at a hole for 10 minutes and no one's going to complain. So I did that and watched this tarantula finally come back out of it. And then I left because I had to go. The sun's going down. We're kind of going to similar areas today. We're chasing trogons again. There's a brown creeper right there. So the trail I take up to that Carrie Nation trail, because again, I know the bench and the tree and the trail. I know where this trogon's supposed to be, but I took the nature trail up from Santa Rita Lodge to, here's the trailhead for the Carrie Nation trail. Along the way, lots of good birds, Arizona woodpecker, blue-gray gnatcatcher. So now I've got my gnatcatcher trifecta. Hutton's vireo, if I'm remembering correctly, black-throated gray warbler. Cordilleran flycatcher, sulfur-bellied flycatcher. Oh, look, I got it. Ding, ding, ding. Pretty soon after I saw the sulfur-bellied flycatcher, that's a good clue you're in the right habitat for the trogon. I hear that, wah, 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 wah. Was that pretty good? Was that good? Wah, wah. I promise I never talked to them on this trip. But right above me, and I watched a couple fly over and perch. Elsewhere along the trail, bridled titmouse. Oh, I forget the name of this flycatcher. It's something like brown-headed flycatcher, dusky capped. It's got a color and a hat. At one point when I was looking at the trogons, I ran into another birder, and we were swapping like, oh, do you see this? Okay, good. Well, I'm looking at this one. And oh, up ahead, you know, we're doing that birder thing. And she said, lots of red-faced warblers up ahead. And she said there was a northern water thrush around. And so I kept going. And at a certain point in the trail, I was getting really hot. I hadn't eaten breakfast yet. And I was just getting in a bad mood, and I was about to turn around, and I was like, I checked the maps, and this Carrie Nation, the mine opening was apparently very close around the corner. So I pushed through, and I'm rewarded with this really good show from painted red starts. And then a bunch of, maybe it was just one, and he was very in my face, but a red-faced warbler, at least one. And I'm getting lots of photos of him, and there's a hepatic tanager. And then I'm just having the time of my life looking in one direction. And at a certain point, I turn around, and this is my view. And right there in the middle, there's a trogon, and it's dipping down into where all this green grass is. There is water coming out of this little cave, the Carrie Nation mine, and it's dipping down and grooming itself, preening itself. And I get like a decent photo of a male. And so it eventually flies off. I go and sit under this pine tree, and I'm eating my breakfast, and I'm happy as a clam. I got everything I wanted. I'm thinking, I'm like, well, you know, this is good habitat for a Grace's warbler. If only I saw a Grace's warbler, that would really be cool. And then like basically as soon as I think that, I hear a noise, I look up. You can't tell in this photo, but there it is. There's a Grace's warbler, and it does come down and sits right in front of me. So I'm just like sitting here under this tree for like 30 minutes, looking at all the birds and having a great time. On the way out, I did finally manage to find that northern water thrush, which was kind of an interesting bird for this time location back in this canyon. Hiking back down, just taking the road, I stop at that Kubo B&B, Bearlines hummingbird. At this point, I had started to encounter tour groups from the Southeast Birding Festival, Southeast Arizona Birding Festival. Big white vans, big groups, you can't miss them. And I passed them right after I saw the water thrush, and I just thought, man, these guys have no idea what's just up that trail. Like I later found out they were doing a big day. They went to the trailhead, saw the sulfur-bellied flycatcher. I don't even know if they got the trogon, and they hightailed it out of there. They were speed birding. They pull up right behind me as I'm watching this whole scene, and I'm kind of ignoring them until I hear one of them say, Jessica? And I turn around, and I'm like, it's Ann Craig. She's a birder up in Denver, but here I am meeting the second person randomly in Arizona. Later after this trip, I would find out that Kip Miller was at Ramsey Canyon like the day after me, and Ted Floyd was at Santa Rita Lodge the day after me. And so basically, I went the time that you're supposed to go. If everybody else chose that specific week, here I am. So after this amazing, like, this is probably my best day. This is my last day, by the way. My best day, it's continuing. I've had this great day in Madera Canyon, gotten what I wanted and more. I go for that 5-striped sparrow. This is Box Canyon. There are a dozen pinpoints of where people on eBird have reported this thing. And I just parked the car, and I'm walking up and down and up and down. I don't know what I'm looking for beyond this one sparrow in a haystack. Along the way, though, there's a hooded warbler. I'm sorry, not a hooded warbler, a hooded oriole. Here's an actual photo of a Scott's oriole. And then I get my lifer varied bunting. Not a good photo, grainy and everything, but I mean, you can tell what that mottled red and blue is. So I was really happy about getting my first photo of this, getting that lifer. So even if I don't find the sparrow, I'm good to go, except I did find the sparrow. And it even showed me why it's called the 1, 2, 3, 5. Yeah. Okay, sweet. And it just sat and sang. It was quite a ways down the hill from me. But I got a great look and could hear it really well. From there, I headed back into Green Valley to the Desert Meadows Park. The only reason I stopped here was because a volunteer at Ramsey Canyon told me, if you want a Costas hummingbird, I've heard good reports of finding one here. And that was at this point, I think, my one hummingbird species I hadn't seen yet. But walking around, really nice place, manicured, labels on all the plants, a lot of places to sit, guard quail on the community garden, hummingbird feeders. That's a good lead. I was watching those. Collared lizard, is that right? Is that what that is? I was calling them burrito lizards because that's about the size they were. I was just taken with the size of these things. And then I did get my young Costas. There's a little bit of purple there, but check. So I head back down to that De Anza trail because, again, like, someone had reported a green kingfisher while I was there, and then that morning as well, and I just didn't get it. I'm like, why am I missing this thing? By this point, the water had dried up even more than just the day before. Here is what this place looks like, mostly puddle after puddle. When you get up close to these puddles, they are chock full of fish. Like, it's like the soup I was eating for lunch every day, just filled with fish and food. I end up not walking north as I had every other time to get that rose-throated Picard. This time I went south. People that saw this kingfisher kept referencing the bridge. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to stay close to the bridge. I walk out in this area I hadn't been to before. As soon as I come around a corner, and this is my view, some bird flies from this little overhanging branch and up to kind of about right there. There you go. And I get binocs on it and a camera, and by golly, it's that green kingfisher. So, whoo, we've had a good day. We're getting everything we wanted. And then on my, 50-yard walk back to the car, I forget the name of this kingbird. Tropical. Yeah, it was the tropical kingbird calling. I didn't recognize the noise. I did Merlin. I finally got eyes on it. Thank you, John. The tropical kingbird. So I'm like, man, I wasn't even looking for that. And it's back to back with this awesome life bird. So we're having a good day. We're having a good day. I took this photo with my cell phone. This is not edited. This is genuinely what the sky looked like that night. But this is how you end your evening every day at Santa Rita Lodge. This is another spot where I ran into the birding festival group. They came right at this moment. I waited for the sun to go down. I wanted to do some nocturnal birding, just listening. I went down the trail to this amphitheater area that people had recently reported different kinds of owls and things. And I just had Merlin running, and I fact-checked a lot of what Merlin said. It told me a couple owls that definitely had not made a call. But as I'm there, I'm starting to get the willies because it's pitch black dark and I'm alone. And I put on my headlamp and I've got my head on a swivel because I'm like, I'm going to catch that cougar. He's not sneaking up on me. But then I catch these two little eyes, very tiny, very low to the ground, not cougar sized. And it's a ringtail. I knew these existed. I just assumed I would never see one, but there's my grainy Bigfoot photo of a ringtail. I head back to Santa Rita Lodge. They leave. Do you not like bats? They leave one hummingbird feeder up at night for, I think they're Mexican free-tailed bats. They're mostly going for agave, but they'll readily come to hummingbird feeders. The owner said that they will drain this thing every night. And so I just sat and enjoyed these big old bats. A ringtail. So it's not a type of cat. I think they're related to raccoons. Kind of weaselly. All right, it's our last day. We're gonna make it. Boy, do I have a lot of stops though. First thing, I get to this one area outside Green Valley at 6 a.m. because there were exact coordinates of a Harris's hawk. There he is. Those are my great photos of him. Where'd my cursor go? Oh, here we go. Unfortunately, I didn't get my camera up until he started to fly away, but he had been on a telephone pole and I got good views. Not good photos, whatever. Yes, I'll have to go back. But I saw him. I was pretty happy. I went down the road just a little bit to turn around and maybe look around a little bit more. Maybe there's another one. And where I happened to stop, I look up and I'm like, man, those swallows up there are huge. Oh yeah, purple martins are a thing. Not on my Arizona bingo card, but here they were hanging out on telephone lines, coming down to this big saguaro. On this particular saguaro, there's a cactus wren and a Gila woodpecker, and then same cactus later, one of the purple martins. So cool, life bird and unexpected bird. Pretty happy. It's only 6 a.m. Headed up to Sweetwater Wetlands. I actually was wondering about skipping this, but I was here less than an hour, overlapped with the birding festival. So apparently good spot to be. I did get my gallinule for the trip, another tropical kingbird, a nice burrito lizard, Wilson's warbler, my one Wilson's of the trip. Then I still had a lot of time left. At this point, we could just head to Phoenix and the airport. But what I started to do was use that explore feature on the eBird app, and just it's like the Instacart and the DoorDash, and you just type in what bird you want and it tells you how to get it. And so I wanted, what about a crested caracara? I've had a really good 24 hours. Maybe I can push my luck. Someone had seen one at this Pima County, you got to go to the wastewater reclamation facility. It was a bust. I didn't see it. On my way there, I see on Google Maps, there's a pond like 1 block over. I make a detour. Pretty trashy park. I wouldn't recommend it. Hey, except I got a neotropical cormorant there. Just one randomly hanging out. So terrible birding location. One good silver lining. The other silver lining of my bust of this Pima County water facility was there were a couple of black vultures hanging out nearby. So again, there's always something. So my plan was actually to go to the Arizona Sonoran Desert Museum. I've heard great things about this facility, just wonderful, wonderful things. I pull in the parking lot and I'm like, let me see what's on eBird. Is there anything good in there? You know, and I just decide to skip it. In my mind, I'm like, I'm going to see a caracara today. And I don't think it's in this particular facility. So I'd love to go back. I've heard great things, but I just ended up skipping it. I went straight to Saguaro National Park. It was still like early. It was kind of 10 a.m. It was pretty, but not super birdy. I think I was here under 2 hours just hiking and driving around. Very pretty, fat, happy lizard. I want to be reincarnated as this lizard right here. So I get back on eBird, give me a crested caracara. It sends me here. Someone had seen one 5 days earlier. They also had reported burrowing owls. I get there and it is just void of all life, save for one roadrunner that ran across. I drive around for a while and there's just nothing here. No caracaras. On the way out though, I did spot some of those burrowing owls. So there was a sign up that indicated this was city-owned property, I guess. But they have like man-made prairie dog holes, I guess. And there were 7 or so burrowing owls, if I remember right, just hanging out all on those perches. So that was nice. And then I was like, well, I could head to the airport. A normal, responsible person would have at this point. But I was like, I'm going to try one more shot at this stupid crested caracara. This time, this report was the day before, and the person reported 7 of them. And the person, their comment on the report was birding festival scouting. And I was like, ooh, this person means business. And if there were 7 of them yesterday, there's bound to be one here today. And as I'm driving miles and miles in the middle of nowhere, I'm watching these storm cells move around. And I'm like, please don't overlap with me. They do not overlap with me. I go to the coordinates. I don't see any crested caracaras. I see this one dot way off in the horizon. And I'm thinking, that looks pretty big. Could be a caracara. Could be a bald eagle. Let's go check it out. It was a crested caracara. Yay. So I got really good photos of this and I got videos of him too. He was the only one there, but I was happy. And at this point, I'm like, okay, I will go to the airport. I will. I've got time. So I made my flight. It was all groovy. Here's the results from that second trip. So more checklists, more species. There were, and oh, one more life bird on this trip. There were still, so now between the 2 years total, I've got 196. By going a month later in September, there were apparently 23 species that I didn't see the second time around. So pick and choose what you want. August is, I thought it was way better because I could hear things. There were babies still. Everyone was vocalizing still. It was just easy as pie to get all the hummingbirds. Trogons were a challenge, but we got them. But that's it. Holy smokes, we're wicked late. I really appreciate you guys actually staying here because I don't think you guys are chained down. That's it. Woo! We made it. This is very normal. I always go over. Thank you. Thank you. Do I take this off?
Questions, but you can email Jessica or stop by the Fountain Creek Nature Center if you would like to talk more about this. Two quick things. Does this belong to anybody who was here last month? Do you have a friend who maybe lost this jacket? No? Awesome. And second, we will have our usual meeting next month, but just out of curiosity, a show of hands, if anyone would be interested in a cookie swap for November. Bring some cookies, take some cookies, maybe 3 people.
Thanks for coming out.
Thank you again for staying really late.